The Chiefs' schedule is out, but you got to take a deeper dive at it. Where's the risk and where's the payoff today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Thanks for joining us for a Red Friday show. Yes, I know it's early to say that, but it really is. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. It's easy right now to get into the action. New customers getting $150 back on bonus bets when you win a $5 bet. Super simple. It's $150 back to you for winning one $5 bet. Check it out at FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We are getting started to take that next step towards what this season can look like and where we have to be concerned, where we should be feeling pretty decent about it. He's Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. I'm Ryan Tracy from Locked On NFL, obviously, formerly, as well as Locked On Chiefs, the network, NFL 33, RGR Football, and Rogue APC. Please check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network because that's your team every single day, no matter what team it is, or if you're looking for the Locked On NFL show or the Locked On Draft show or any of the other national shows, they're available 5 days a week plus as well, just like we are. So sub, hit that bell here on YouTube, and join us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on any audio platform that's free. You're going to find us 5 days a week plus. And if you need that much better, that much more, you can get it 816-357-8781. It's our insider text line. We're going to go over the gotcha games, the things that we got to make sure we don't trip over through this season process. Where's a chance for this team to get right during the season? And we're going to start right off the top with a couple of options, honestly, in what is the toughest quarter of this season. I know it's not even quarters anymore, folks, with 17 games, but we still break it down like that. Most of the league does as well, because you want to get subgroups so you can take a run at each quarter to get a winning record. I'm interested to see what you think. What's the hardest quarter in this schedule?
I don't think it's close. I think it's the last quarter, and it's not necessarily because of who they're playing. It's because of how they're playing and how quickly they're playing it. That's really what it comes down to for me. You play a very physical game against Cleveland Browns on the 15th of December, and then you have the Houston Texans 6 days later on a Saturday game in Houston. Or sorry, that one's at Arrowhead, but the Cleveland game is in Cleveland. Then you play at Arrowhead 6 days later, and then 4 days after that, you play on Christmas Day for the second year in a row against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh, which means I don't even know that you should get 1 day of practice in that week, because you're going to have a travel day, which you're going to probably be traveling on Tuesday, and usually you get Monday off. I mean, I guess you could maybe have a Monday practice, but it's going to be a 10-10-10 at most. And then you finish up that quarter against the Broncos in Denver. And while that should be an easier game, going from two very physical games and what I think will be physical with Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and then going to Denver and playing in the elements the last week of the season. Hopefully you have your season wrapped up, but if you don't, that's a problem with the elements.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And, I think there might be time for a cold tub day and a quick walkthrough. I don't even know if 10-10-10 will get it done, to tell you the truth. But you're right. It's going to be very light. And that is probably the toughest 3-game stretch. And like you said, the way that they're oriented. But I think overall, the toughest one to start is because I haven't been as confident in the way these seasons begin lately, because of not the Super Bowl hangover in that playing in that game, but just the 20-game season hangover. It's felt like it starts slower and slower, and it's more vanilla into the first quarter every single year since 2019 to me. And when you start with the Ravens and the Bengals and the Chargers in 3 of the first 4, I think that's not only maybe not the toughest in terms of compressed schedule, but toughest opponents at the time of where you are in your development, when you know you need your rookie class to contribute. And the mental part of being prepared to know that if you go down those games, you set yourself up for a tougher season. You put yourself in a hole early against good teams. It's going to make the whole season longer.
It's definitely going to make the whole season longer. And you're in a situation where you're playing multiple games on prime time. You open up in prime time. The next game is at 3:30, which is not a prime time game, but it's more of a U.S. wide game. And then the Falcons game is prime time, and you have another prime time game 2 weeks later against the Saints, which I know we're talking quarters, but technically speaking, that would be basically the first quarter, because you're looking at that 5-game stretch as being your first quarter, especially with the way the bye breaks this year. So to me, it's going to be a tough schedule. And the only games that you don't have that are going to be primetime are Cincinnati and the Chargers, and both of those teams should be pretty good. So that's going to be a tough matchup. Both of those are going to be tough matchups.
Yeah. It sets the season up to kind of end the way it begins, with significant like season changing and outcome changing games at the very beginning and at the very end. That's not to say that it's cushy in the middle. There are some gaps. We're going to talk about those coming up here. But to start with bookend quarters means a couple of things for me that I think the team needs to be prepared for. Yes, they're going to have a third consecutive year where the rookie class contributes. This is accelerated in my mind. These 4 games in the first quarter mean that you have to get them ready to play and contribute, not just get reps and get used to the NFL speed of this version of the game, but you have to be able to gain yards and stop players right away. In the first 8 quarters of your career, you got to be able to contribute. If you're a first-round draft pick, if you're a guy that wins a position battle, there's enough of those guys here that it's problematic. And I think it has to change the way they go about the preseason in order to get them ready. What do you think?
Man, it's going to be fascinating to see what they do this year in the preseason, knowing how they start the season off. And I mean, there's such a huge difference between starting off that season, the season 2-0 in this structure than it is 0-2. I mean, obviously 2-0 is better than 0-2, and we know that, but looking at who they play, it becomes even more imperative because you're going to be playing against 2 teams that are likely going to be fighting for playoff spots, and that's going to matter when it comes down to the end of the season. So you have to start quicker. You have to play better. The one thing I will say is you go back and you watch last year's, it did look vanilla. It did look normal to an extent, but be fair about that. If Travis Kelce plays in that game, I don't think it's a game. I think they win that game, and I think that they win it probably going away. And don't forget, they also didn't have Chris Jones in that game. So, you take 2 of their best players, 2 of their best 3 players in the NFL at their positions, and you take those 2 guys away, and they lose week 1 in a game that they should have won without those 2 guys. So I think that they're going to be better off. I think that you look at what they have. They have a veteran wide receiver that I think should be able to come in and do something in Marquise Brown. Rashee Rice is probably going to be out, but I think Worthy should be able to be a guy that steps in and at least has a role week 1. And it doesn't have to be on the field 50% of the time to be effective. His speed can be effective and can change the game. So there's lots of different things that you can do with him. And if the left tackle, if Kingsley wins left tackle, that is a huge deal for this, and he will definitely be tested week 1.
Yeah, that is absolutely for sure. So knowing that you have these games on either end, where can they make up some ground? Where they can get to the point where they can execute, get comfortable, and get reps for the rookies? That's coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is the key time. It's winner take all season in a number of different leagues around here, the NBA and NHL in particular. The Avs are still alive. If you're one of those guys who's watching them like I am, you can still get into the action. And they are giving you a shot at FanDuel to bring home a huge win of your own. Right now, new customers are getting $150 back in bonus bets onto their account just for winning a $5 bet of any kind. It's $150 back on spreads, on the player props, on money lines, on whatever you want to get into. You can do it all at FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can get there today, and you can make every single playoff shot count at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The place, folks, whether you're up late or up early, if you need 24/7 sports news, get on Locked On Sports today here on the Locked On Network, on YouTube, and on Amazon Fire. You can get 24/7 coverage of all the major sports outings from all of our local hosts here on Locked On Sports today. Today is not what we're talking about, though. What we're talking about is after a first quarter and a last quarter that we know are going to be stressful, that are going to be season defining in the end, Where are the quarters? Obviously, there's only 2 left, but where are the keys in those that you can get right? Is there a stretch that you like in one spot or another? Is there a combination of opponents that give you a little bit of breathing room? Where do you stand on the rest of this schedule?
Quarter 2, I think, is the get right quarter. And I know it starts off with the San Francisco 49ers, and that should be a tough game. But you look at the rest of the schedule in that quarter, and you go to Vegas after you play San Francisco. I think that should be a game that, after they lost last year to the Raiders, I think that they're going to take the Raiders a lot more seriously. And the big question when it comes to that team is who's going to be their QB? How's their offense going to be running? Kansas City's offense, I think, will be fine and be humming at that point. At least I hope it will be. So you're going into that game, and I think that should be a good game and should help them get right. Then you get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Denver Broncos. To me, I'm not going to say Tampa Bay is going to be a bad team. I think they could be okay. I just don't think that it's, when you look at the rest of the schedule and you start looking at, the quarter number 3, you have a couple of different teams that I wouldn't want to play. The Bills, for me, the Bills, the Raiders, and the Chargers in a quarter is not going to be an easy quarter.
Yeah.
Raiders are going to be difficult a little bit, but I think they'll be better off this year. I think the Chiefs will be better off this year than they were last. I still think Tampa Bay and Denver really helps, and I think the Raiders could help. It just really depends on how the Raiders come out and what they get done at the quarterback position and how effective their offense can be.
Yeah, I think the team that wants to run in the Los Angeles Chargers is maybe not the team that needs to run the most in the Las Vegas Raiders, but we're going to find out. I look at this schedule, and you have some good points in there, but I come away with this answer. There is no get right quarter. Even if you broke it into thirds, I can't really say that there's a get right area, right? You have the Broncos. Yes, I agree. You get the Carolina Panthers in week 12. Eric Eager will be helping them prepare their game plans. And a number of folks will want to see the L'Jarius Sneed reunion or whatever we're going to call it at that point. Yep. All that said, those are the only games that I really see on here that are, hey, this is going to help you correct a mistake that you might have made earlier in the season. So they have to keep hammering through it. And we're going to talk about what are the games that you can't take for granted. That's coming up later. But all in all, like you said, there's enough in each quarter to keep you on your toes. And I think that might be a good thing as well. Because if you have a get-right quarter where you can relax, that sometimes lets you get all the way down, letting your guard down against somebody that you really shouldn't.
Yeah, and I can see that. I guess I would also argue that I think the San Francisco game, with the placement of when it is and coming off the bye, I think that that's actually going to help Kansas City as well. It's not going to be like they're coming off a game, 6 days prior or something like that. I mean, they're going to have a full week off. They're going to have their rest and relaxation. Although we don't like the bye week being that early, and I don't. That I think actually helps in that quarter to an extent. Andy Reid is fantastic coming out of a bye. He's going to have an extra week to prepare for the 49ers. I think that's going to help as well. And depending on how, and what we don't know right now is what is going to happen with Rashee Rice. I mean, maybe he only gets a 4 or 5 game suspension. Maybe he's back for that game. I don't think so, but we don't really know what's going to happen right now. And, you start talking about how this offense could be looking a lot different and a lot better. You get them 2 or 3 or 4 games in, I think that you're going to have a pretty good idea of what you have at the wide receiver position, how your offensive line is playing, and you're going to be starting to get into a groove. And that's, I think, what's important.
Yeah, the groove is all important. I do want to focus on that Niners situation too, because we might be seeing a tale of two worlds right there. If you're right, and indeed you could see Rashee Rice return by then. If he's coming back, there is a distinct possibility out there that either Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk is not on that roster by then. A lot of rumors going around about the Niners still wanting to move on from one of those guys. I think that's really intriguing, because I think if they do that, if they choose to part ways with those 2 guys that I felt kept them in last year's Super Bowl, this might be a dramatically different team in terms of its ability to compete with the Chiefs than we saw in that Super Bowl. Whereas right now, I feel like it's probably still something that it's going to be a slugfest if they had to play tonight. But do you read it the same way?
It's interesting. I think, and there's another part of this too, is Greenlaw back? I mean, they lost one of their captains in the middle of the Super Bowl last year, and while I would think that he would be back, one of the big things is it was an Achilles, right? So, I mean, that's an injury that could take quite a while to come back from. And even if he is back, is he going to be anywhere near 100%? I mean, I can't imagine that he would be back 100% by that point, having injured it just in February. So, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. But injuries are going to play a part in this, and we'll have to see how. I mean, you're right. Both those receivers, or one of those receivers, could be gone. And the trade deadline is actually moved back this year. And I'm not sure. I was trying to look and see if I could figure out the date that it got moved back to. But you look at that. You look at that game, and Kansas City has played San Francisco very tough the last couple of times they played them. So I think that could play into this.
I think you're absolutely right. They got to pay attention. And that is something that's fairly easy to do because it's the San Francisco 49ers and you just face them in the Super Bowl. But there's the opposite as well. What do you have to watch out for? What do you got to keep your guard up for and make sure that you are finally attuned? What are the gotcha games coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network?
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much, much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Guaranteed Fit is a good thing. So is being able to get 24/7 coverage of your favorite sports. It is over at the Locked On Sports Today feed here on YouTube as well as Amazon Fire TV. Go check that out for everything that you need 24/7. This comes down to the last tripwires that I think we got to watch out for. There's some that have bitten the Chiefs in the last couple of seasons. And I just want to run through and highlight one that stands out to me. And it goes back to starting hot. It's real easy when you take a look at a quarter and you have the Baltimore Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, and Los Angeles Chargers all in one to go, okay, we got an easy week the other week, right? The Atlanta Falcons are not that easy. And if you sleep on them too much, parity in this league is enough that they could jump up and bite you, especially if your rookies haven't adapted yet, only 2 games under their belt and having played some significant foes. Kirk Cousins is likely to be there. I know he's throwing the ball here in the preseason as we stand right now. Obviously, they had the debacle of the draft, which you can find out more about over on NFL33.com. You can see my thoughts in terms of team building. But they also made some trades. They moved Desmond Ridder, they got Rondale Moore. They have, obviously, I think 2 quarterbacks that are more likely to take advantage of what they have in Drake London and Kyle Pitts. This is enough of an offensive scheme that I feel like if the Chiefs are starting unseasoned guys in the secondary, maybe they're trying to still figure out the pass rush by game 3. This could be something that gives them a little bit of trouble in terms of having to make sure that you put up points as though you were playing the Bengals. I think that's the first tripwire for me. What do you think?
I can see it. The argument that I would have against that being a tripwire would be if they start anything other than 2-0. If they start 1-1, if they start 0-2, that's not going to be a tripwire game because at that point you're in a situation where you cannot afford to lose another one and you're going to be focused. And so I think that that's the big key is it could be a letdown game. If they start 2-0, especially if they start 2-0, it's easily something that they could overlook. And that's absolutely something that you have to worry about. You know, the one that I think that you have to worry about is probably, honestly, the Denver Broncos game on the 10th of November. And that's because look at who you're playing the next game. It's the Buffalo Bills. and you're going to be looking forward to that game and going, that is our game where it's basically a rivalry at this point, outside of the Bengals, because I think the Bengals are a rivalry at this point. I think you could say that the Chiefs Bengals is a rivalry game. Ravens is not quite there yet. Could it get there in the next couple of seasons? Yeah, but it's not quite there yet. So you sit there and you look at it, but Bills Chiefs is, and it's going to continue to be a rivalry type game, and it is going to be a huge matchup, especially because you're in the part of the season where, you know, who knows what you're going to be looking at as your record. You know, did you start off 2-0? Are you able to, you know, find 4 wins in the first 5 games? If you do that, I think you're feeling pretty good and you're going to be in a good situation going into week 11. But not being ready for that Broncos team because you're looking forward to Buffalo, I think is a big problem, or a big potential problem, I should say.
I think you're absolutely right. That is a key one. One other that stands out to me, beyond just the fact that you have to keep your wits about you and not look past the Denver Broncos there, especially if Bo Nix has started to click on, is the game just before it, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I know a lot of folks are just unenthusiastic, and I can understand from a standpoint, you're getting Baker Mayfield, and the ups and downs of his career over the last few years maybe says, oh, I don't have to be that nervous. But here's the thing, is they retain him and Mike Evans as a pair in order to play together. They have the best chance of adding some talent. I think Jalen McMillan is going to bring some new life into that offense. Nothing against Trey Palmer. I don't know that he can hold McMillan off. I think that expands what Mayfield in particular can do. They're going to add some running game there. They're going to be able to put up points still. I don't think they're going to see a large step back. And when you take a look at their defense, they have maybe one of the few people in Zion McCollum who's likely to win their left outside cornerback position that can actually turn and run with Hollywood Brown. I don't know if he can keep up with Xavier Worthy. It's not that close, but at least take away some of the deep speed with them. And that's a unique thing. They just paid Antonio Winfield. And so he's going to be out to make a mark as well. And he's made some plays against the Chiefs in the past. Up front, Vita Vea, joined by Kalijah Kancey. And now they're adding my guy, Yaya Diaby, from a draft ago, who looks like he's going to play some significant stats for you. Plus, they added some other pass rush. This is a team that on paper maybe doesn't scare you as much as it should, because on the field, I think they're going to give them a run for their money.
It's going to be interesting to see what Tampa Bay is able to do. You look at their offense, and I think they're going to have a good offense. It's just a question of, can they be consistent? And that's going to be the question, I think, with that team. Are they consistent week in and week out? And obviously, Kansas City hasn't been consistent the past couple of years during the regular season. That's been a problem. So that could create a problem there. The one that I'm going to throw out there that I think people may find interesting is the Cleveland Browns. And while I think a lot of people think the Browns are a good team, it's look at the schedule around the Browns. You play the Chargers the week before, which is going to be a big game for you. And then you come back and you host the Houston Texans, which if the Texans are looking anything like what they did last year, that's a huge game too. And I'm not going to say that they're going to overlook the Cleveland Browns, but the problem is that you don't know what you're going to get from Deshaun Watson. And until we figure out how that team is looking, maybe they've struggled most of the season up until that point. Maybe they are a team that is playing well. We'll just have to see. But to me, that's a potential letdown game because of who is in front of it and who is behind it, especially considering that starts your 3 games in 10 days.
Yeah. I mean, but that's why you get paid the big bucks if you're Andy Reid. You got to keep them focused. You got to keep everybody on the edge to keep pushing forward. That's what we see as the pitfalls and the cush spots. What do you guys think? Leave your comments down below here on YouTube. Let us know what you think the gotcha games are, or what you think the toughest quarter is. You can go over to Spotify and Apple and leave those there as well. We appreciate you. I hope that you guys are ready and set up for your weekend, because it's going to be some fun. OTAs begin next week, and we're going to have content for you previewing as well as going down with the results of them. This team is going to start coming together and show us some flashes starting next week. So please join us 5 days a week plus here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and particularly for your Chiefs. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next